Okay, today we're doing a deep dive into someone really fascinating, the singer-songwriter, the author, Mike Doughty.
Yeah, his career is,
Mm-mm,
well, it's quite a story. Not your typical path at all.
definitely not. It's like a series of these really dramatic reinventions, and it almost perfectly mirrors how music itself has changed over, what, the last 30 years?
That's a great way to put it. His whole journey, it's basically a masterclass in how to survive creatively,
Yeah.
how to adapt.
Right.
So we're going to trace it all, starting back in '92 with Soul Coughing, that really groundbreaking band he fronted.
All the way through the messy breakup of that band.
Oh, yeah, the very messy breakup, and then how he completely rebuilt everything himself, DIY style.
And bringing it right up to today, which is maybe the most surprising part, this full reunion of the original band, after all that.
It's kind of unbelievable, really.
Yeah. So for our sources today, we've got a lot to draw on: biographical stuff, deep dives into his discography, and crucially, his own writing. His memoirs are incredibly frank.
They really are. And that's key to our mission here. We want to give you, the listener, a really solid understanding of this artist, someone who went from this very niche downtown New York avant-garde scene.
To actual mainstream hits.
Exactly. And navigated some serious personal stuff, addiction, recovery, and then, maybe the most talked about thing, how he basically tried to redefine his relationship with his own biggest songs.
Yeah, that whole re-recording thing, we'll definitely get into that.
And we should probably just state up front, the sheer amount of music this guy has put out since going solo.
Oh, totally. Michael Ross Doughty, born 1970, by the way.
His solo work covers so much ground. All rock, yeah, but also alternative hip-hop, electronic stuff, even trip-hop.
And since 2000, which is when he got dropped by his label after Soul Coughing split.
Get this, over 18 albums. Studio albums, live albums, EPs.
Yeah.
Since 2000.
That's relentless.
It is, and mostly independent. That level of sustained output, that independence, it's absolutely central to who he is as an artist now.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Because, like you said, his background is not what you'd expect. It's this really stark contrast to the kind of, artistic chaos he ended up creating.
It really is. His father, Robert A. Doughty, was a pretty prominent military historian, an officer in the U.S. Army.
Right. So you picture the guy behind Super Bon Bon, maybe coming from some artsy bohemian family?
Nope, not at all. He grew up surrounded by serious structure. Army bases, Fort Knox, Fort Hood, Fort Leavenworth. These were his childhood homes.
And it gets even more intense in his teens. He actually lived on the grounds of West Point, the United States Military Academy. His dad taught there.
Think about that environment. Discipline, rules, hierarchy. It's the absolute opposite of the downtown New York music scene he dove into.
You have to assume that was something he was consciously pushing against, escaping from.
Oh, definitely. So age 19, he makes this huge shift, moves to New York City. And what does he study? Poetry at the New School.
Trading the uniform for free verse, basically.
Pretty much. Structured history for, well, spontaneous creation.
And even in that poetry class, he was an interesting company. The sources mention this specific course, The Shape and Nature of Things to Come, taught by Sekou Sundiata.
Yeah, and check this out. One of his classmates, Ani DeFranco.
Wow. Okay, so even before the music really took off, he was already moving in these high-caliber, fiercely independent artistic circles.
Exactly. He wasn't playing professionally yet, but he was honing that voice, that kind of lyrical stream of consciousness thing that became such a signature for Soul Coughing.
But the jump from poetry student to musician, that happened because of a specific place, right? The Knitting Factory.
Absolutely pivotal. The Knitting Factory in the early 90s, it was just ground zero for avant-garde jazz, all sorts of experimental downtown music. A real hotbed.
And he wasn't just hanging out there, he worked there as a doorman.
Yeah, which is crucial. He wasn't passive. He was there night after night, soaking it all in. The noise, the energy, the weirdness, frankly.
Well, the guys who became Soul Cough, they were all part of that scene, too.
All of them. Doughty, Mark Degliantoni on keys and sampler, Sebastian Steinberg on bass, Yuval Gabay on drums. They were all regulars there. That environment is literally where the band came together in '92.
Let's dig into that scene a bit. What exactly was this avant-garde jazz like at the Knitting Factory then? How did that influence a rock band?
Well, it was all about pushing boundaries. Lots of dissonance, improvisation was key, and they definitely threw traditional song structures out the window.
Okay.
Rhythm sections were really fluid, complex time signatures, playing with textures instead of just keeping a simple beat.
Right.
So for soul coughing, you had Steinberg's bass lines, these walking, sometimes really jarring, almost atonal lines. And Gabby's drumming was super restless, very jazz-influenced. That created this incredibly loose improvisational bed.
And Doughty's spoken word poetry thing went on top of that.
Exactly. That and Degliantoni's samples,
Yeah.
layered over this constantly shifting soundscape.
Which brings us right into Soul Coughing, the band. Part 2, basically. Their run from 92 to 2000. Unique sound, some real success, but volatile.
Unique might be an understatement. All music nailed it pretty well, I think. They called it a willfully idiosyncratic mix of improvisational jazz grooves, oddball samples, hip-hop, electronics, and noisy experimentalism.
That's a mouthful.
It is. But Doughty himself summed it up perfectly. He called it deep slacker jazz.
Deep slacker jazz. I love that. It really does capture the contradiction, doesn't it?
Totally. The deep jazz part is that complex, serious musical foundation. But then you have the slacker overlay his very laid-back, almost rambling stream of consciousness lyrics.
So how did his vocal style actually mesh with the band's playing, technically speaking?
Well, that was the genius, but also eventually the source of a lot of the tension. Doughty's lyrics, they demand your attention. They're narrative specific.
Right.
But Degliantoni was building these dense rhythmic landscapes out of samples, sometimes weird samples, sometimes snippets of things, often fragmented. On the early stuff, his samples weren't just decoration. Sometimes they were the main rhythm.
So Doughty had to fit his free-flowing words into these rigid, often kind of strange sample loops.
Pretty much. It forced his natural verbal rhythm into these tight, unusual structures. The result was, structured chaos. It worked, but you can see how it might create friction.
And it worked commercially, at least for a while. They got signed pretty quickly to Slash, which was part of Warner Brothers then.
Yeah, after that first gig in June '92, initially billed as M. Doughty's Soul Coughing, things moved fast. They put out 3 studio albums that built momentum.
Let's track that rise. First up was Ruby Vroom in '94.
Right. Ruby Vroom was raw, really experimental. It laid down that unique sound blueprint.
Then came Irresistible Bliss in '96. And this is where they started to show they could maybe package that weirdness into something more like pop songs.
Exactly. And it started to connect commercially. Irresistible Bliss hit 136 on the Billboard 200 chart. Not huge, but significant.
And you started hearing them on the radio more. Soundtrack to Mary got some traction on alternative radio.
Peaked at 37 on the U.S. alt chart, yeah.
And then the big one from that album, Super Bon Bon.
Super Bon Bon. That was the breakthrough, definitely. Hit number 27. If you listen to that track, it's like the perfect soul coughing formula.
How so?
You've got that driving, repetitive sample loop, kind of funky but strange. And then Doughty's very distinctive vocal delivery over it. It felt accessible, but it was still completely weird. That's a hard trick to pull off.
And they didn't stop there. The sound kept evolving. 1998, El Oso. Sources say this one had a lot more drum and bass influence.
Yeah, they were definitely incorporating more sophisticated electronic sounds, faster break beats. It was a natural progression, folding in what was happening in electronic music at the time.
And LSO was their biggest commercial success, right?
By far. Reached number 49 on the Billboard 200. Pretty impressive for a band that weird. And this album had the hit Circles.
Circles. You couldn't escape that song.
Peaked at number 8 on the Billboard Alternative chart. That's a proper hit single.
And a huge part of why it was inescapable was where it showed up. That Cartoon Network commercial.
Oh, yeah. The one making fun of the repeating backgrounds in old cartoons. Using circles for that was genius. It just cemented them in the late 90s pop culture landscape.
And it wasn't just Cartoon Network. They were all over soundtracks around that.
Everywhere. It showed their versatility, or maybe just how much their unique sound fit the vibe of the late 90s.
Let's tick some off. The X-Files soundtrack, Songs in the Key of X.
Yep. Unmarked Helicopters, 1996.
Then big movies. Batman and Robin.
The Bug. Yeah.
The Spawn soundtrack, that collaboration with Roni Size.
A plane scraped its belly on a sooty yellow moon. Great title. And showed their connection to that UK drum and bass scene.
And even video games. Gran Turismo 2 had Super Bon Bon.
Right, 1999. So yeah, they were kind of in this sweet spot. Critics liked them, alternative radio played them, and Hollywood used their music. Pretty unique trajectory for a band born out of that experimental knitting factory scene.
Just as they're hitting this commercial peak, things are falling apart internally. The band breaks up in 2000. This is where it shifts from creative sparks to, well, bad blood.
Yeah, and this is where Doughty's own words, especially in his 2012 memoir, The Book of Drugs, become really crucial. He didn't just say they had disagreements. He called the band dynamic a dark, abusive marriage.
Wow, that's strong language.
It really is. It suggests that struggle, the constant push and pull between his vision and the band's improvisational approach, wasn't just creative tension. It became toxic, damaging.
And it wasn't just artistic fights. His personal life was spiraling.
Massively. The memoir is brutally honest about his addiction issues. Opiate painkillers, heroin, alcohol. He makes it clear that his addiction was a huge factor in the band's volatility and why, ultimately, it just couldn't continue.
So the breakup wasn't just, we decided to go our separate ways. It sounds like it was almost a necessary implosion. For his own survival, maybe.
That's how he frames it, an act of self-preservation. But when the band did end in 2000, it triggered this immediate professional and personal crisis for him. A total reset was forced upon him.
And the consequences were immediate.
Brutal. Even though El Oso and Circles had been successful, Warner Brothers dropped him. Just like that.
Why? Didn't they see potential in him as a solo artist?
Apparently not. They'd signed Soul Coughing, the unit. The label seemed to have zero interest in the frontman, especially one who was newly sober and, clearly damaged goods in their eyes.
So rejected by the institution, that must have been rough.
Rough, but maybe also the best thing that could have happened for his next chapter. It forced him to completely reinvent himself, strip everything back. And that rebirth starts with an album called Skittish.
Right. The Skittish story is fascinating. It really sums up that theme of rejection, doesn't it?
Totally. Because Skittish wasn't new material recorded after the breakup. It was an acoustic album he'd actually recorded way back in 1996.
While Soul Coughing was still going strong.
Exactly. But Warner Brothers rejected it back then. They wanted the electronic, sample-heavy band sound, not some stripped-down acoustic stuff.
So after the split, he digs up this rejected album.
And turns it into his first statement of independence. He didn't shop it around. He just started burning it onto CDRs himself. Plain white sleeves, super basic.
Wow.
The packaging, or lack thereof, was part of the message. This is just me, direct, no filter, my terms.
And he didn't just release it. He took it on the road in a pretty extreme way.
Oh, yeah. This is the legendary grassroots phase. Here's a guy who had played huge venues, opened for Dave Matthews at Madison Square Garden.
Right.
And now he's renting a car, driving himself across the country. His first solo acoustic tour covered 9,000 miles. Alone.
9,000 miles. That's a serious commitment.
It's the definition of grind. He was doing everything, booking the gigs, driving, performing, and then after the show.
Selling the CDs.
Selling the CDs himself. Literally sitting at the edge of the stage, talking to people, selling these hand-burned copies of Skittish. No merch table, just direct interaction.
That must have been such a contrast to the dynamics he described in the band, like direct connection versus that abusive marriage.
You have to think it was therapeutic in a way. And
Yeah.
incredibly effective. It took about 3 years of this constant touring.
3 years.
Yeah, relentless road work. But over that time, he sold 20,000 copies of Skittish, hand to hand.
20,000 independently.
And independently. He built this whole new audience, people who knew him just as Mike Doughty, the solo guy, completely separate from Soul Coughing. He proved he could exist and thrive on his own.
Does that kind of intense DIY experience change how an artist views their own work? Like, does managing the business side force you to be constantly creating?
I think it has to. When you are the label, the distributor, the whole operation, your relationship with your output becomes very direct. You learn exactly what connects with your audience, what keeps the whole thing afloat. It definitely fostered that habit of constant creation we see later.
And even during this rebuilding phase, he was still doing some other stuff, like that BT track.
Right. Never going to come back down from BT's 1999 album Movement and Still Life.
Yeah.
Doughty did the lyrics and vocals. It's a good reminder that even while he was grinding it out acoustically, he still had that connection to the electronic world.
Okay, so that intense DIY period, the 9,000-mile tours, it eventually leads to a comeback moment.
Yeah.
Part 4, right. A chance encounter changes things again.
Exactly. The turning point was the Bonnaroo Festival in 2004. Doughty's there, still mostly doing his independent thing, and he bumps into Dave Matthews.
Who, as we mentioned, was a big Soul Coughing fan back in the day.
A huge fan, had them open for him twice, including those MSG shows. And crucially, Matthews tells Doughty he's actually a fan of his solo stuff too, specifically mentions the Rockety Roll EP and the song 27 Jennifers.
Wow. That must have felt like huge validation, proof that the grassroots effort was actually reaching people, even at that level.
For sure. And Doughty, being smart, didn't waste the opportunity. He had some rough mixes of an album he'd been working on in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Interesting.
Yeah, with producer Dan Wilson. They'd been connected by their manager, Jim Grant. So Doughty gives these rough mixes to Matthews right there at Bonnaroo.
And Matthews liked them.
Loved them, apparently, because he ended up signing Doughty to his label, ATO Records, and released the album.
Which became Haughty Melodic.
Haughty Melodic, famously an anagram of Michael Doughty.
Ha! I never knew that. That's great. It's like stamping his own name on it, literally.
It really symbolized that embrace of his solo identity. And the album did well. Singles like Looking at the World from the Bottom of a Well and I Hear the Bells got significant exposure.
Where do they pop up?
TV shows, mainly. Grey's Anatomy, Veronica Mars, big shows at the time. That really pushed him back into the mainstream consciousness.
And the ultimate proof he was back.
Appearing on Letterman. The Late Show with David Letterman. That's a huge leap from selling CDRs off the stage edge.
Absolutely. So post-Haughty Melodic, the floodgates kind of open in terms of output, right?
Totally. This is where the sheer volume becomes undeniable. He puts out more mainstream-ish singer-songwriter albums like Golden Delicious in 2008, Sad Man, Happy Man in 2009, consistent quality stuff.
But he didn't just stick to that one sound. He kept experimenting. What about that album Dubious Luxury from 2011? That sounds different.
It was different. That was him diving back into electronic music, sampling, chopping things up, kind of like the soul coughing aesthetic. But this time, he was completely in control, doing all the production, the sonic manipulation himself.
So proving he could do that weird stuff on his own terms.
Exactly. It showed that even with the singer-songwriter's success, he still needed that experimental outlet.
And alongside the official albums, he did these other releases that really connected with his core fans, right? Like that live album, Busking.
Oh, Busking is amazing. Limited edition, only sold at shows, and it was recorded, get this, during an actual busking session in the 14th Street subway station in New York City in 2007.
Seriously, he went back to playing in the subway after being on Letterman.
Yep. Talk about contrast, right? Former major label star, West Point kid, now back playing for commuters. It speaks volumes about his connection to that direct, unmediated performance style.
It feels like performance art almost, on top of just playing music.
It really does. And that direct engagement continued. He did the Question Jar Show in 2012, an album based on his tours where he'd answer audience questions written on slips of paper.
Yeah.
Super interactive.
And maybe the peak of that direct-to-fan model was the Lo-Fi Lodge?
The Lo-Fi Lodge.
Fine.
Also 2012. That was wild. A subscription thing. He promised and delivered 32 tracks over the year. Acoustic versions, demos, rarities, one track every single week.
That's a demanding schedule for him and the fans.
It established this really intense ongoing relationship with his core audience, which leads perfectly into how he started funding things.
Right, the crowdfunding. He really embraced that early on.
He's a pioneer, really. Used platforms like Pledge Music very effectively for multiple albums. Stellar Motel, Live at Ken's, and the big one, the Soul Coughing Re-Recordings project.
And wasn't he also doing Patreon pretty early?
Yeah, using Patreon to release a new song every week for subscribers, just $5 a month. He essentially built his own self-sustaining creative engine, funded directly by fans. No label gatekeepers needed.
That freedom, financial and artistic, must have been what allowed him to tackle the most charged project of his career.
Definitely. Which brings us to part 5. Rewriting the past, or at least re-recording it.
2013, Circles, Super Bon Bon, and the very best of soul coughing. The title alone is a statement.
It's pure defiance. This wasn't just, here are some new versions. He explicitly said he was recording the songs the way he originally intended them, before, in his view, the band altered or damaged them.
Okay, but let's push on that. He called the band a dark, abusive marriage for years. Then he re-records the hits from that era, calls it his best of, and sells it. Isn't he still cashing in on the success created during that abusive period? Isn't he relying on that very catalog?
That's the absolute crux of the controversy. It's the unavoidable ethical tightrope.
So how did he justify it?
His argument, laid out extensively in the Book of Drugs, was essentially therapeutic and artistic reclamation. He felt the songs themselves, his lyrics, his melodies, had been twisted by that negative environment. Re-recording them was, for him, about restoring their integrity, asserting ownership.
So the memoir kind of served as the manifesto, justifying the musical act that followed.
Pretty much. It framed the narrative.
Yeah.
And how did his core fans react?
Yeah, did they buy it? Literally and figuratively.
Well, the Pledge Music campaign for the re-recordings was funded almost instantly, hit 100% in just a few hours.
Wow, okay.
So clearly, his dedicated fan base, the ones who'd have followed his solo journey and read the memoir, they supported his right to do it. They validated his version of events.
And he treated these new versions as the definitive ones going forward.
Absolutely. He toured behind them heavily, even put out another live album in 2014, Live at Ken's House, featuring only the re-recorded versions.
So if you went to see Mike Doughty solo then, you heard his versions, not the ones from the 90s albums.
Exactly. It was the ultimate statement. This is how these songs are meant to sound now. A complete rebellion against his own recorded history.
And all this was happening while he was also putting out books, right? Solidifying his narrative.
Yep, slanky. Poems and Songs in 2012, then The Book of Drugs the same year, which laid all the groundwork we've been discussing.
And he wrote another memoir later, too.
Yeah, I Die Each Time I Hear the Sound in 2020. That one focused more on his musical influences, how his tastes developed. His writing is crucial to understanding how he frames his entire career.
He wasn't just sticking to music and books either. He did a rock opera.
Based on the Book of Revelation, yeah. Called Revelation in 2014, always exploring different formats.
And he physically moved away from the New York scene, too.
Moved to Memphis in 2015, kind of reinforcing that identity as an independent artist operating outside the traditional industry centers.
But even with all this focus on his own path, he did eventually circle back to the soul coughing material even before the reunion, that Ruby Vroom anniversary tour.
Right, 2019, 25th anniversary. Played the whole album. Yeah. That felt like maybe a sign. A controlled re-engagement, still on his terms, but maybe hinting that some healing was possible.
Which sets the stage for the final act, Part 6, the new band, and then the completely unexpected reunion.
Before the big reunion, though, there's Ghost of Vroom, his project with Andrew "Scrap" Livingston, his longtime collaborator, announced in August 2020.
What's the sound like there?
It definitely leans back into that electronic hip-hop influenced sample-heavy style. It feels like a dedicated space for him to create new music in that vein, separate from the soul coughing legacy.
And they've been pretty active.
Oh, yeah. An EP in 2020, Ghost of Vroom 2. Then albums in 2021, Ghost of Vroom 1, and 2023, Ghost of Vroom 3.
And consistent production, too.
All produced by Mario Coldado Jr., gives them a really unified, polished, modern sound.
Interesting detail about the release order.
Yeah, Ghost of Vroom 1 was actually recorded first, but they held it back until COVID touring restrictions eased up. Because for Doughty, the live show, that direct connection, is still paramount. The album release needed to coincide with being able to play it for people. That DIY grassroots ethos is still there.
Okay, so Ghost of Vroom is bubbling along, and then the first crack in the ice between the old bandmates appears.
The first real shockwave, February 2022. Doughty and Sebastian Steinberg, the bassist from Soul Coughing, actually performed together.
Where? How?
It was during Steinberg's set with the Watkins Family Hour in L.A. They did Super Bon Bon and True Dreams of Wichita. First time any of them had shared a stage in 22 years.
Wow. Just those two.
Just those two. But it was huge. A public signal that maybe, just maybe, things were thawing after decades of frost.
And that small step led to the big one in 2024.
The massive news. June 2024. Soul Coughing officially reforms all 4 original members, Doughty, Degliantoni, Steinberg, Gabay, back together.
After everything written in the memoir, after the re-recordings, this is genuinely stunning.
Monumental is the word. And they didn't just announce it, they announced a tour. September, October 2024, their first tour as Soul Coughing in 25 years. This wasn't a quiet reconciliation, it was very public.
And they went straight back into the spotlight too, right? The TV appearance?
Yep. Celebrated the 30th anniversary of Ruby Vroom by playing Super Bon Bon on Jimmy Kimmel Live in September. First TV appearance in decades. They fully embraced the reunion publicly.
And it seems like it's a real ongoing thing, not just a one-off tour.
Looks that way. They've already announced a live album, Live 2024, coming out in April 2025. That suggests this is a functioning professional band again.
So wrapping this all up, Mike Doughty's career is this incredible story of 2 identities almost.
Totally. You've got the visionary, sometimes difficult leader of this cult, groundbreaking band.
Who then had to completely break away from it.
Right, and then becomes a super resourceful DIY solo artist who masters connecting directly with fans, crowdfunding, building a whole career on his own terms.
It's an amazing arc. From West Point kid to knitting factory doorman to unlikely pop star to hitting rock bottom and then this painstaking rebuild.
That rebuild phase is just incredible. The 9,000 miles in the rental car, selling 20,000 CDs out of the trunk, basically. That's pure creative survival.
And we should definitely remember how important some specific places were for him, like Minneapolis.
Oh, absolutely. Soul Coughing was apparently massive. They're way bigger than in other cities, largely thanks to the radio station Rev 105 playing them constantly.
They could play huge shows there.
Yeah, 5, 10 times the size of shows elsewhere. And that connection was made permanent when they got a star on the First Avenue mural.
The iconic club in Minneapolis. Wow.
Yeah, a huge honor. It shows he wasn't just an NYC phenomenon. He had these deep regional roots, too. He took all that rejection, all the personal struggles, and somehow spun it into this incredibly diverse, sustainable, creative life. The 18-plus solo albums, the memoirs, Ghost of Room.
The core theme feels like self-reclamation, doesn't it? Taking control of his story, his music.
Exactly. He weaponized the trauma of soul coughing, using it as fuel for his fiercely independent solo identity.
Which makes this 2024 reunion just so fascinatingly complex, especially for you, the listener, who might know the history.
Right, because he spent years telling everyone how bad it was, how the original songs were compromised. He literally re-recorded them to fix them, framing his whole solo thing as a rebellion against that past.
So now they're all back together, all four original guys, playing those original songs, presumably closer to the original versions.
Which leaves us with this really provocative question, doesn't it? After an artist goes to such lengths to defy and redefine their own history, their own hits.
What does it sound like when they reconcile? How does the sound of this 2024 reunion square up against the sound of rebellion that defined him for so long?
That contrast. That's something you, the listener, really have to hear and grapple with yourself. Is it closure? Is it compromise? What does reconciliation sound like after all that?